Thank you so much, Liz. Tansei, McGeough Nasigasan, Amiska Waskaskigan. I hope everyone had a good lunch and is ready for the discussion this afternoon that will follow. I feel so very honored to be facilitating this panel. I had an opportunity just to introduce myself very briefly to these wonderful women, and thinking about this idea of where we are now and transferring knowledge. How do we go about moving this knowledge, transferring this knowledge? And it seems so appropriate because of the exhibition in the galleries here, talking about the storied objects and the stories that they hold, and then how do we then gather this knowledge, and how do we produce and bring it forward into for the next generation. And so we've asked each of the panelists to kind of consider this about their own practice, their own work, and how they go about transferring knowledge. And so thankfully, they've agreed to kind of sit with us and share with us what they've been doing and how they see this act of transferring knowledge from each of their own particular positions within their communities. What I'd like to do is have the opportunity of each of the panelists to introduce themselves, and then by then, maybe Sherry will join us and we'll complete the panel. So could I ask you, first of all, who would like to start? Anyone like to start, or?
Well, I'd just like to welcome everybody here. It's been a beautiful couple of days, and enjoying everybody's company and getting to know more artists. I think when, and my name is Margaret Harrison. My relations are Pelches, Racette, Cardinals, and Brabants. And I come from the Qu'Appelle Valley, and then also from the Souris River Valley. So my family seems to, follow the rivers from the Qu'Appelle to the Souris, and then of course from the Red River. But I just want to say that in my travels and over these years now, I'm counting down, so I have to, get a lot of work done. And I just want to thank each and every one of you here for the support that you give to one another in the art, in every form of art that we speak and touch. I've started calling a lot of my work hand stories, because in every work that I see, there is a story for sure, and I'm always interested and curious to see how that came about and why it turned out this way. I know when you're doing your work, you start out on a piece and you don't know where it's going and how long you're going to go with it. And I know you have to pull yourself away from saying, okay, that's enough now, let it go. But when I started doing rug hooking, my mother was the one, of course, that taught me how to do it. And of course, the ladies, I'd like to pay homage to all of those Métis women, my aunties and my grandmother, who in the valley used this as a form of keeping food on the table for their families as well, and how they work together to keep an area for themselves to be able to sell their work, because, like you say, it's everybody has their territory, and so they would have their areas too that they would sell to. So I just wanted to say, to pay homage to these ladies who carried this work through the valley, and so this is why I started to do it myself, and to keep their names going, like just to say their names, like Adeline is my mother's name, and it's nice to be able to make that connection in our families. as our traditions are inspired, of course, by my work. But the Valley, I think, had a lot to do with how I developed a way to create the colors and the stories. So these are just stories like that we're sitting at the table with that I get, creative from. So I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Margaret. So my name is Cheryl Troupe. My family's Red River Métis. They're Cooks, Short, Sumpervilles. Left Red River, came to the Fort LaCorne region around the North Saskatchewan, and then into Prince Albert. I've called Saskatoon home for about 30 plus years. I work very closely with Margaret, and we've been doing this kind of work together for about 20 plus years. I'm a trained historian, but I've also worked with Karon and Sherry in various capacities, so I'm really looking forward to our conversation today and talking about knowledge transfer, because I've learned so much from all of these women. I think we've all learned together as well, so thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Karon Schmon, and I'm a Red River Métis who was born and raised in Saskatchewan. And I used to say that I had connections to Chittick Lake, but I really feel like that I'm from there too. And so after our families, which is Adams, McLaughlin, and Pocha, had the run put on them in Manitoba, and they moved westward, Chittick Lake was one of the communities where my mom was raised, and we've been going there since we were little kids. So I think that was actually her way of transferring knowledge, is to make sure that we felt connected there, and that the things we were doing there that we didn't even know were Métis just became just what we thought every family was doing. And so I think that was a blessing, one of the first blessings that I had. And then I feel very fortunate to be in my current position as the Director of Métis Culture and Heritage at the Gabriel Dumont Institute. And the museum and gallery there is, I guess, what I consider my life's work there. But we also have a robust publishing program where we support artists as well. And I've had the privilege of working with everyone at this table, and I know I don't take that for granted because of my white privilege or my positional power, white passing, I guess, if we're talking about colorism, that I have that privilege to work with artists, artisans, and elders almost on a daily basis, and it makes that job. You talk about this Shushkitew, meaning the flame. That's the fire that burns no wood for me, is that I get to do this every day. And so I'm having a heck of a time reconciling my age with retirement. And I just joke around that they can build a box by my desk and I'll fall in. I'll turn it over to Sherry next.
Hi, Sherry Farrell Racette, teach in the Department of Visual Arts at the University of Regina. I was born and raised in Manitoba, but I spent a great deal of my adult life in Saskatchewan. I'm not connected to the Red River settlement, which has become rather contentious in the last few years. Didn't used to be. I was saying to someone, I remember when we were all half-breeds, it was just so much easier. My parents were from Quebec. They're both, and that's like, I think of the contemporary thing, it's like, oh my God. And the family names are Polson, King, McBride, and Aubuchon. So yeah, I got a link in there somewhere. And then on my dad's mom, her father was a McConts from Oka, and her mom was a Lavallee from Algonquin Park area. I grew up in, I was born and raised in an apartheid town. It was a company town, but there were a lot of Métis people around. And you really couldn't throw a stick without hitting a relative of Louis Riel's, because his sister married a Lavallee, and there were lots of Lavallees. So I grew up with stories that weren't exactly connected to my own experience, which was really interesting. But that was my community. That's where I was raised. So.
Thank you all very much. One of the questions that when we were organizing this gathering and thinking about, transferring information and transferring knowledge, and thinking about what knowledge needs to be shared intergenerationally, and specifically with your experience. But, I'm thinking of, all of us have really different kinds of experiences in terms of being Métis, but in your opinion, or even in your experience, what are the types of knowledge that you would like to see, transferred to successive generations? What are the things that we need to, the tools kind of that we need to pass on to, successive generations that you feel are going to help us? And I'm saying helping. I'm probably the same generation as most these women sitting here at this table. But thinking about that in terms of what you've seen, what are the tools that we need for our communities, for our people, for our future? Sherry, do you want to start?
Well, I can tell you what I get asked most. Mostly what I get asked is for people who are wanting to be able to do more deep contextual work with their families and their family experiences and their artwork. So I get asked those kinds of questions a lot. So I help a lot of young artists with their, I don't want to say genealogies because that's such a money-ass thing, because we don't have family trees, we have family nests. We got cousins marrying cousins, we got 3 brothers marrying 3 sisters and sorting, and the names are kind of unstable. But like, for example, right now, I'm on a grant with Amy Malbouf and Carrie Allison, and they've got a performance piece under development, and it's about kind of journeying from where they're living now to where their families come from. And they've had a few blocks in terms of accessing information, and so that's what I'm doing. I'm sitting, just one-on-one saying, okay, so where's your roadblock here? And just because you do it a lot, you get better at it. So I get asked that a lot. And so I think understanding those family connections and helping people, because I had an experience, and just, forgive me for storytelling, but when I first started working at GDI, I could say to the students, because we had this big, huge card index of everyone who applied for script, whether they got it or not, and if they got turned down, why did they get turned down? This huge, big thing. And so what I used to do is I'd say, write down the names of the families you're related to. And when I first started doing it, I was younger than most of my students. And they would just write down 4 or 5 family names, and off they'd go and have a heck of a good time up there. Then one year, they all just looked at me, and it was a group that I actually had quite a bit of conflict with, so I was thinking they were just being jerks. But then I saw one girl who I knew her family, and she just was like this. So I went up and I said, well, are you okay? Like, what's up? And she's like, I don't know. And I looked, and she had her mom's maiden name written down. That was it. And her uncle is one of my best friends. So I'm like, okay, it's Mackenzie's Carriers. And I'm telling her, I'm like, and so in my head, I'm like, what is wrong with this picture? That this girl who doesn't know me from a hole in the ground is getting this information from me. And so out of that, we started taking students to the archives. But before that, when I lifted my head up and I looked around, they were all gone. Like, all the other students were gone. And I was like, I thought, those little, where they're smoking. So I went to where they smoked, and I was like, boy, I'm going to give them, and then they weren't there. So I went walking all over the Institute, just stomping around looking for them. But it was such a good lesson for me, because where they were was talking to their relatives who worked at the Institute. They were on the phone calling their moms, their aunties, their grandmas. And then there was a bunch of them, is Kimmy here, that were in the library talking to Marilyn Bellamer, who was a librarian, and Dorothy Fant, who also worked in the library. They couldn't just pull this information like out of their head. So then we started, collaborating together to take them to the archives to support them in that knowledge development. And as an institute, we were training teachers, so this is coming from education. The role that played in giving them solid ground to stand on before they went into the world where they were going to be challenged for all kinds of reasons, and to see the difference that made in them in terms of their own growing into their Métis selves. And it was like all the things we talked about. Some were brown, some were blonde, they were all over the place. But to see them say, I'm a Desjardins. So like maybe their dad was white, they had a different last name, but I noticed some of them have even changed their names. Like, so that some of them are going by their Métis names now and have dropped the other names because they know who they belong with and they know where they stand. And that, to me, is something, you know, I started doing a long time ago, and I still find that's the thing that people are asking.
I think knowing where you come from, I think that's probably one of the most important things that we learn about ourselves, as, you know, who our relatives are, who we're related to, having a sense of place, of having a history, and also recognizing that, you know, this is a history that, as Métis people, we have this really deep connection to place that no one else has. You know, we have a really deep connection to a really unique relationship with this place we call Canada.
See, I don't have that so much as an individual because I was, you know, I will occasionally go back to my family's territory. So I'm afraid the Capel Valley people are stuck with me.
We'll take you.
Because I married and divorced out, but I'm still there because I.
Sure. Gave myself some notes. I'm probably approaching this from a little different angle because I'm not a practicing artist. I see myself as an advocate and an ally to Métis artists. But, you know, we started off talking about seeds, planting seeds. That was in the early day, and I like the name of the collective as well, meaning that flame. And then today when Jim said we want our art to be valued and respected, and that kind of signaled to me, well, I can make that part of this talk because I believe that that's what I have been doing, even since the time when I started out as a classroom teacher. And I want to say also that I've been an advocate for literary artists, Indigenous literary artists and performing artists, as well as the visual artist. And I think you do that by modeling that. Like today's kids are the people in the future that will be wanting to value and appreciate art, who can afford to buy it, who will be making decisions in boardrooms and organizations, and be the allies and advocates that can sustain that value of what it is. And I thought, since you know, we talk about storytelling being the way that we share things, I can remember when I taught my class Métis finger weaving, because we were going to Batoche, and we were all going to wear the sash that we made. And so we named our classroom the Rainbow Weavers, and of course the sash had the colors of the rainbow in it. And you know, just putting that value on it. But this was in a neighborhood where the kids couldn't even afford to bring the money for the charter bus and that. So I said, well, let's think of what some practical uses for finger weaving would be today. And so they named off bookmarks and dog leashes and luggage tags. And we found there was a folk dance group that wore something like sashes. And so we started marketing this stuff and selling their finger weaving. And they were realizing they could actually make money by being an artist. And so I think that placed that value on it right from the get-go, is that they would see and experience art and value it. And I had announced to the class that we were going to the Mendel Art Gallery, which is no longer exists in Saskatoon, but at the time I was teaching it was. And one of the kids said, why are we going there? We went there last year. And I said, well, how many of you like going to movies? And they all put up their hand. And I said, well, you better not go to any more movies because you've been to a movie theater, right? Oh, yeah, but the movie changes all the time. And I said, well, so does the art in the gallery. And I said, but you change too. So every time you go, you're going to see it through newer eyes because you'll have more experience and more knowledge. And so I think just putting that value on it, that this was something to be appreciated. And then I feel pretty silly sometimes about some of the advocacy I'm doing, or just those little tiny things with one student or something like that, thinking, is this really making a difference? Westmount School is a school in Saskatoon that has a very high Indigenous population. I used to teach there, and it was about 90% even in the day that I was teaching there. And they were going to be unveiling a mural by an artist named Jeff Blue Sky Crow, and I had actually taught him when he was a boy. And so this mural's actually stunningly beautiful. And so he's up there giving his remarks and everything, and he said, we'll leave out the old part, but he said, and I want to thank my old teacher, Miss Schmon, because she encouraged me and she always made sure I got the good paper. So, you know, and I'm thinking, wow, he still remembers that. And I'm thinking just giving a kid that wants to be an artist the right paper is a leg up from what they could have done. And in that neighborhood too, like, you know, you take a lot for granted that what people have in their home, but I would have kids come up and ask me, Miss Schmon, can I take home a piece of paper? And I always said yes, because I thought, so you're coming from a household where there's not a piece of paper where you can do some art at night if you want. And so just little things like that. And, you know, these are going to become the artists of the future, the appreciators of the future, the consumers of the future, the allies of the future, and the advocates of the future. And they're going to be politicians, influencers, decision makers, and the benefactors. And so we can't change that mindset if you let somebody say, oh, well, they're 40 now, they're in a position of influence, and then say, would you please appreciate art, and would you please appreciate Indigenous art? It's something that I think is got to be grown and developed right from the get-go. And like, I used to be in a position where I could only appreciate art if I could buy one of those art cards that would fit in a frame. That to me was, oh, I have my own art. I can put something I like in my place. And so just appreciating at that level, which I think is your average consumer. And one of my favorite gifts is an art card that I received from a person that I care about a lot, and to me it means a lot that they knew that I was going to appreciate that gift. And so there's room there for everybody to be influenced, to be an art lover, and we all have a role in doing that. So I think I'll stop there and pass it over to Cheryl.
My teacher did that for me. Made all the difference. Thank you, Karen and Sherry. So I, like Karen, don't necessarily see myself as an artist. I would say that I'm more of a maybe an art facilitator, or a person that tries to make space for artists. And I think I do that in many ways. I have strong relationships with Margaret, but I also work closely with Maria. And the work that she and I do often involves, you know, long road trips and stops at the secondhand store and long conversations about Métis politics and gossip and history and philosophy and all of those things. And so that's really provided, for me, really cultural grounding, which I think is so important. And I think all artists, all Métis people need that. But one of the things that her and I try to do together is we try to create these spaces where Métis artists can be showcased and celebrated and shared in venues where they might not think about Métis art. For instance, in 2013, we had what we called the Half-Breed Ball, and it was we've had 3 of them already, and both Sherry and Karon were part of that. But it was a celebration of Métis, all kinds of Métis art and Métis food, and it was done in a very sophisticated and classy way, where we were showcasing who we are as Métis people to academics, Indigenous academics from across the world. And so this was a space for us to really celebrate who we are. And I think about like the work that we're going to be doing with these story bundles, sharing the ways in which Métis stories can be told, and not just visually, but, you know, incorporating music and food and old people and stories about family and community and how important that is. So, you know, we try to do some of those things to create that space, because people need that space. And I think also, you know, the work that Margaret and I have done together, she's been a huge supporter for me throughout my last 25 years, and I have dragged her to all kinds of things, and you know, I've always tried to incorporate Métis cultural teachings into all my work, and Margaret has been huge in that. And, you know, thinking about making space for, I'm going to get emotional, thinking about making space for her art, you know, like having her shown here is such a big deal.
Thank you.
And this is a long time coming for her. I won't look at her. So yeah, this is a long time coming for her, and it's part of. She's got a piece in the Nickel Gallery now. We had 2 rug exhibits over the summer at Batoche National Historic Site and Motherwell Historic Site that featured her work, and it's really moving for me, obviously, to be able to create these spaces as a gift back to her for the work and the teachings and all she's shared with me. So I'm going to stop there.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. Continue on, but yes, she's been a great supporter of mine.
Thank you.
And I think we work well together, and she's accomplished so much in these last few years. And of course, you know, I'm so proud of her as well, as, you know, she's reached her doctorate now. So I'm just happy for her. Also, I'd like to, if I have the chance, I'll thank Karon and GDI for always supporting me. And I remember the day Leah Dorian came and said she wanted to come and interview us. And I was just, you know, really honored for her to come. And of course, my mother was alive then, and my mother was in her 90s by this time. And when she came to interview us, it was amazing you know, like my mother was quite shy, but to think that we were, you know, interviewed, I think, about art that we just call guineas. You know, we work with rags from whatever leftover things that we had. And that's how my mother worked. To create a piece was just whatever she had in that guinea bag. And create something that, you know, people were interested in. And that's how I felt that day that they came and asked if we would create one for them. And I think it's still hanging there, you know, all these years. So that was a pretty proud moment that I could share with my mother, who passed on and left me with this to carry on. So I need more hookers, more hooking people. So I just encourage anybody that's interested in recycling. I think we did that before it became popular, but it's a fun thing to do. And I just want to thank these people, and Sherry as well is so inspirational for me to read her books and to see the colors that she can pull out and create something beautiful. And I think that's what we all want to do, is create something beautiful for people in all our hand stories and our voices and our just keep on creating beauty for us.
One of the things that we had in Saskatchewan, so for those of you who are not from Saskatchewan, there are similar kinds of things that happen in Manitoba, mostly through the MMF and Louis Riel Institute. But the Gabriel Dewan Institute was established in 1980. So how long is this? Getting around there, right? Geez, says my daughter learned to crawl in my office, right? So that's how long it's been around. But there were a couple of things that happened there, and we had annual cultural conferences, and every local in the province set representatives. And it was not uncommon to have 800 Métis people in one place for the weekend. Well, I can tell you that was fun. Politics was wild on the floor with the motions coming forward, But then, once that was over and the fiddles came out, it was just visiting and, yeah, connecting. It was amazing. So in and amongst that, we also had workshops, right? So there was hands-on workshops. There was people setting direction for what kind of work they wanted people to do. And then and then around that time, Maria had the first half-breed ball. And so I got to be one of the MCs. And so I was God knows what he told me to say. Norman Fleury was funneling me McGeough to say, because they knew I could kind of half-ass talk French. Lord knows I'd see them laughing, those buggers, and I'd be like, what the heck did he just get me to say? But it was music, theater, visual art, and really awesome food. And the first one we did was for the Law Society, Indigenous law group, and they were having a thing. And probably the best joke that we enjoyed was all those lawyers were eating illegally hunted food because it was all Métis harvested, right? So there was one of the women had a van full of meat driving it in from Alberta. She got stopped by the cops. Like, there's more misadventures, because we have talked about making a book about the half-breed balls. And so they were like a certain amount of chaos and all of that, but within that there was this great joy that we just would get together and do these wild things. And so we've had many opportunities where there are hands-on workshops, like GDI had a cultural conference not that long ago. You were doing workshops there. I did a workshop, so that, facilitating these spaces for learning and these spaces for coming together. And I think, if we took a page out of the people from New Zealand, they have an annual gathering of all the artists, like Pacific Island-born artists born in New Zealand. Once a year they get together and they do all the arts disciplines. And I think that that's something that we maybe need to think about, is that we're too small to be subdivided. It's very, very powerful, and we can speak to that, to have the musicians, to have the hand workers, to have the visual artists and the poets and the writers and the photographers and the playwrights and the filmmakers all in the space, because we all draw from the same well. We all draw from the same well, and we express it in different ways. And so those, for those of us involved in them, those were transformational. I think we had, 3 of them?
4 of them.
4 of them. I never did get to eat,
Can I go next? Is
Yeah,
that
go
okay?
ahead.
Thank you, Sherry, because that reminded me, I was asked to be a facilitator of a finger weaving workshop at that cultural conference. I was already a teacher then. And I wasn't thinking of myself as an artist, but I did that. But then what happened later was somebody there from the Friendship Center must have known that I was a finger weaving teacher, and they said, oh, we're going to have Folk Fest pretty soon, and would you come and demonstrate finger weaving, and you can sell your work too. I said, well, I'll demonstrate it, but I'm not going to sell it, because I said no one realizes how much work goes into this, and I said I'm not going to have people bartering with me and thinking they can get a sash for $5 or something like that. So I said, I'll just demonstrate it, and I said I don't really need to make any extra money. So anyways, I was demonstrating, and there's a First Nations artist named David B. Williams who was showing his art, but he was also selling his art, and he comes up and he says, how much is one of your sashes? And I said, I'm not selling them. I said, I'm just demonstrating today. I said, people don't really know how much work went into it. And he goes, well, how about if I trade you one of my paintings for one of your sashes? And I went, ding, that's the first time I was ever valued and respected. And then I said, okay. And I'm thinking, gosh, your sash is going to wear out, but my original art from you is going to be there forever. So he comes back with a really big one, and he goes, how about this one for 2 sashes? So, this whole idea that if you're not going to be appreciated, it's going to be extinguish your drive to do it as well. And so I think that, again, planting that seed, that artist to be valued and appreciated, I think is really important, and it's really important for our folks, because a lot of times it's undervalued. So
now that I have some composure again, I just want to say one of the, like, listening over the last 2 days, talking about, models of artist councils or whatever, and I think GDI, we're very lucky here in Saskatchewan, and I think we take it for granted sometimes that GDI is the institution that it is, but it's a space where, where artists and of all kinds get to kind of ground themselves, get some nurturing, cultural nurturing and teaching, but also the opportunity to be who they need to be. And it's really, like I said, we take it for granted, but I think about all of the people that have come through the Institute and have been, like, they probably have the biggest collection of Sherry's work. They have the biggest collection of Christy Belcourt's work. Greg Schofield does work through there. Wilfred Burton does work through there. So we have this really rich community because of GDI, and I think it's a very solid model because it's grounded in community, and community is always the driving force of what comes out of there. So I think if the collective is going to look towards some kind of a arts council, advocacy, whatever it's going to be, I think models exist in our community, and that there's, it's an institution, but it's our own institution. It's not a Western institution, it's our institution. And so there's processes and policies and things in place that are specific to who we are. And I think it should be held up as a model that others should look to when they're trying to build something for themselves. So I encourage all of you, if you haven't been there yet, I'm gonna, Karon gets to work about 8:30. But if you haven't been there yet, they have an amazing museum collection, and it's like this hidden jewel in Saskatoon that people don't know about, or Saskatchewan that people don't necessarily know about it. But it's amazing, and if you haven't been there, please go and visit before you leave Saskatoon. So thank you.
I think sometimes I've heard a couple of times this idea of institutional change or our own spaces, and I think of the benefits that I've had working in Indigenous institutions, GDI, and First Nations University, and how it changes when you're working someplace else. But I always get, my daughters often says, we need to be everywhere. We need to be everywhere. And so it's not a question of choice, it's a question of all of it. We need to be both, we need to be everywhere. I was working with the Winnipeg Art Gallery. Julia Lafreniere was there in a key administrative position, and it made all the difference, because you don't have to explain anything. She would anticipate needs, like it was. So yeah, we need to be everywhere. The fact that I was doing a thing for the University of Manitoba, and I was overwhelmed, and it was like the Louis Riel Institute crew turned up, Janine and her mom. It was like they were just there. So it's like we need both. And I think what I've found in the last few years, it's very different to be teaching in your own institution than to be teaching in a university. And so that's been I'm getting better at it because I go back and forth. And so what I've come to think of my classroom like a tent, right? So I think rather than thinking institutional change or whatever, because, it's a big task, now that I'm just like you, I'm thinking of my shelf life. I'm thinking of what I want to do, what I want to achieve, the art I want to make, the books I want to write, the stuff I want to accomplish. Institutional change is extremely low on that agenda. But still, I find it really important work to be there. I'm there. I've got students. Holly, when I was teaching Art History 100, this young woman, of course I know her last name because I lived in Saskatchewan forever, comes marching down the thing. Hi, my name is Holly Aubuchon, and I want to be a curator. And so David and I were like, hey, do you have Holly Aubuchon in your class? So it's like we had our eyes open for her, right? She didn't need much, right? Just validation, the odd thing from time to time, perfectly competent, doing such an awesome job. Right now, we are just cheering for you. But it's like you're there for that one student who walks up to you and says, this is who I am. And that's important work too. That's really important work. And so sometimes what you're doing, as I was joking with Janine, that she knows I'm really good at sneaking, it's from my sketchy youth. Very good at sneaking into places I'm not supposed to be in. That's an admirable skill for the future. And so you know how you would kind of like hold the door open for your buddies? Yeah, so that's what you're doing at an institution.
I think
You're
since
kicking the door open and holding it open for the ones that are there. That's it.
Since we're on the topic of institutional change, I encourage everybody to not be afraid to walk away when it's not a good fit.
Yes.
I'm going to extol Sask culture for coming around. But at one point, we have this Métis Cultural Development Fund, which is, Sask culture has funding for different individuals and organizations and groups to do cultural activities. And so they asked GDI if they would, we would like to administer the fund, and of course we said yes, because we thought we were in a position not only to encourage people to apply for it, but to maybe have a more informed opinion when it comes to the selection of them. Well, what it turned out to be after a while was we were just we were to fit into their process of doing things and then also be silent while we were doing it. So in other words, we knocked ourselves right off the having any influence in any way, shape, or form. So we actually gave it back to them. We said, we don't want to do this anymore. You guys can administer that fund yourself. And that went on for a couple of years where hardly anybody was applying anymore because I think the community had lost faith in them. And also the individual artists were not being shoulder tapped because why, they weren't famous or something, I don't know. But eventually they asked us if we would take it over again, and we said, okay, but this is what we'd like changed. And so we did impact change at Sask Culture. We have an inside advocate there with Damon Badger Height. And so that is not only getting more applications and more funding dispersed, because it's the same things happening as what happened on the federal level, where all these funds do not get used. So then you're at great risk of them being applied to some other initiative. And not only is the fund going better and more artists are having access to it, but now they're going to fund GDI to do cultural activities as well. So I think, you know, you've got to be prepared to walk away sometimes when it's a poor fit rather than just putting up with the status quo.
Or breaking your heart on a rock.
Yeah.
You know? Because, yeah, sometimes walking away, that's what you have to do, right? I think one of the things that I notice about, like, teaching is people want, I just taught a class called Radical Stitch, and it was a mixed bag of students. And so because when I'm teaching now, I'm just like, okay, I'm going to teach you this so you can experience it, but I'm not giving it to you. And I noticed back in the day, that's what people would say. I'm going to teach you this, but I'm not giving it to you. Or they would say, I'm teaching you this, and I'm giving it to you. So it's like helping people understand the difference of having an experience that will enrich their understanding, but you're not giving it to them, right? So people back in the day were very clear about that they would be giving it. And of course, if it's coming through your family, that's a different thing. So that's what I did. I'm like, you're going to have this experience. I'm not giving it to you. If anyone says you have no right to learn this, you send them to me, because I make the decision what I teach. And so I'm quite happy to be accountable as, you know, a person that's doing this. On the other hand, if I see you out there doing whatever, then you answer to me, right? So it's like this, I will, you know, create this safe space for you to experience this. And then, you know, and so far it's been great. I mean, the stuff was so good, we're doing a little show, creating a little show. But it's, yeah, it's different. And it's like trying to figure it out, different ways of doing learning and teaching when you have an all Métis student body, which I enjoyed for many years, and then a mixed bag of students. And I do teach stuff on the Kimooch, like, you know, if I have like Métis students, like, stay after God, or I'll help them do, you know, like like it's not like everyone gets the same thing. No, right? I don't mind favoring them because there's other classes they're going to be taking crap in. So it's like they're always my faves. They know it too.
It kind of brings up the point that was talked about earlier in terms of, what we share and what we don't share. And in particular, even in terms of transferring that knowledge of knowing, what people are prepared to understand and also what they might not be prepared to understand. So in terms of I know each of you probably do a lot of mentoring in your work. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that process for you and mentoring, and even thinking about how can we perhaps encourage people to seek out those opportunities for mentoring or being mentors.
Well, it's a funny business, right? I don't know if I want to be on someone's list of potential mentors, right? Because yeah, it's just happens. And sometimes you can set up a thing where here I'm doing this thing with this group of people and you end up mentoring some of them over time. But I don't know. I just find sometimes you just connect with people. Or people it's based on relationality. It has to be based on relationality. And I think that if what I'm finding lately, and probably, especially Margaret, I bet you find this, is that if we're not careful, people exploit our knowledge and don't necessarily respect it. So we do have to be careful in that respect, that it is a reciprocal relationship. And you need to be kind of sure that what you're giving someone isn't going to be taken or not fully respected. And that's something I learned the hard way, which I think a lot of our lessons we learn the hard way. But I'm a bit careful. But I also have, it's not that I don't mentor men, but I have my girls, And it's also that, and I will well, then it's you don't mess with my girls, right? So I hope they know that, right? So that if something happens, so it's not just being a mentor. And then people throw the auntie thing around a lot too. And I'm someone who is close to my age called me an auntie, and I'm like, come on, buddy. But it's also, really? You want me to be your auntie? You know what? That also comes with a bannock slap. Yeah, you know that, right? So it's just you're right, Val? So I think it is important. It's important to be accessible, but it isn't straightforward, and I have no idea how that could be institutionalized unless you volunteer, because I know MAWA has set up in Winnipeg some mentoring situations. I know Wally Dion is doing a mentor thing here through the Saskatchewan Arts Board. Ruth Cuthand has been a mentor. So you can step forward to be a mentor through some organizations. Yeah.
I think, though, the concept of mentoring doesn't always fit within a professional or an institutional context, because the relationships that are created are so personal, right? And they go beyond what is the professional kind of mentorship, right? And you become embedded in each other's lives. And so it's not necessarily something that fits within kind of a Western understanding of what mentorship should be, right? Is that it's kind of a more practical kind of thing. And I think about our relationship and, some of the things that, we might have done 15 years ago together, I still draw on in different ways. And it's like, oh, remember that time, that we did this, or, we were here and we had this experience together. So it's long term, and that doesn't necessarily fit when you're teaching and you see students maybe once, and you see them for 13 weeks in a semester and then they're gone, or you might see them over a year or a couple years because they're in your program or whatever. So there's not necessarily the opportunity to build those really long-term relationships that are so important, that can carry you, through your life, right? So I think in that way it's different. Yeah.
We did a thing at the WAG, and a girl I taught in grade 6 was there. And we've stayed in touch through social media. The first thing she started telling me about was what she was beading, and she started reclaiming her grandma's beadwork, right? So I end up staying in touch with a number of my students, not all of them, of course. but yeah.
Well, and some relationships I think are different. Like, you know, I've had relationships with other elders that I've known for a very long time, but, you know, know them in different ways and, you know, have access to different knowledge at different times. And it's, you know, based on kind of an ebb and flow of the relationship, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's a process of connecting and reconnecting and then, you know, going for a period of time, not connecting, then connecting again. But it's always that relationship is there, but it's not necessarily, you know, prioritize is not the right word, but it's not necessarily the, you know, like it's not as strong at that moment,
Yeah.
but it's still there, right?
Yeah, it's sort of like something that's to the side that
Yeah.
if you need it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like what you do,
Yeah.
you guys work together all the time,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Well, I've just started mentoring a couple of young people, particularly like how you make connections, you're saying, and it, through art, of course, is where we kind of met, but it was through, I think, this pandemic in, you know, how I see young people, you know, going through and being stuck downstairs or wherever and not really being involved with anybody. And I think this is where I was looking at this young person because she's been alone for a while and has other responsibilities in the home, and she's trying to, you know, keep that up as well. And so I thought I wished I could help her when I first, you know, noticed her really after meeting her a few times. And with this new project that I've started with the traveling library, and of course you want, you know, youth and elders to be part of it. And so I just sort of thought she would be the you know, one of the good fits in this area because she knows elders and she's been taught, you know, how to really look after an elder in that sense because of her grandmother. So that's how I think we kind of got to come together, and I wanted to just bring her sitting up like she's kind of like this. And so I want to try and uplift her. And I think with her coming here and enjoying this like this, and I'm just praying that, you know, this is going to really build her esteem, her self-esteem up. And I think that's where young people are in a lot of ways today, that, you know, we're kind of not hearing their voice and we're not listening. Like in our own families, I think too, because we're used to them being there, we're used to them going to the room, and so we just leave them, right? But when you're an outsider looking in, like a grandma who, and a great grandma who's looking at them and they're sitting at the table and they're on their phones and, you know, nobody's looking at one another. So so this is where I started with just, you know, bringing some self-esteem because of, well, we're talking mental health issues all over today, you know, and I'm sure they hear this, and I think they're scared. It scares them. So I think just respecting them and just, you know, supporting them in just a simple way, I think will help. So that's where I started anyhow, because I felt that way with Cheryl. Like Cheryl was she was mentoring me instead of me mentoring her to, you know, to bring this to this day. You know, I mean, we're both very overjoyed with being able to be here with everybody and supporting one another all these years, to watch her grow as well. So yeah, I'm thankful. I learn from her a lot all the time, and so sometimes we can get that mix together, and so I just pray that you find somebody like that you can, you know, work together that way and think like them a lot. And so yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you, Cheryl.
I feel like I've been mentoring within our institute processes and ethics. Then I think I'm indigenizing from within. We're very respectful of artists and of their intellectual property, as well as seeing that they're fairly compensated for their work. And so it's really important to me that the artist is always acknowledged and that the work is appreciated. And of course, nowadays, that best appreciation is some monetary appreciation so that they can continue doing what they're doing. But in terms of like how we function as a work group too, like it's very collaborative, and I hope I have created the workplace culture where everybody feels free to bring their ideas forward, and it doesn't, I hope I'm not having that top-down hierarchy. They say a good leader does such a good job that when they leave, it's barely noticeable. And so I know that the department will be in good hands, and I hope the rest of the Institute will be too. I did approach my boss, I guess within the last year, about something that happened that was not very cool to be happening. And I said it will not be some cataclysmic event that assimilates the Institute. It'll be the cumulative effect of a number of these small incidents. And that's why we have to address each and every single one of them as seriously as if they were the big threat, because you have a slip here and a slide there and a slip here and a slide there, and then pretty soon you're just functioning like a mainstream organization. And I'm going to keep barking.
Well, certainly a lot of really, really good words. And it's, for me, even listening to the conversation here and taking away, things that I've learned from your words, and thinking about myself as being, in the institution, of being a teacher, of working with, Métis students. I now have 4 PhD students, Métis, and, building critical mass in these ways. Hopefully I'm a mentor to them as well. I'm still learning myself, and it's always that exchange that they teach me as much about me and show me in a mirror. Sometimes I really don't like it, but it is, that exchange and that idea of passing on knowledge, and then knowing that, we're planting seeds and we're tending our garden. Sometimes it gets a little weedy and a little out of control, but definitely, the work is there, and it's the seeds that, I'm planting are only there because of the fact of the people before me that have been able to open those doors and place and create, I guess I'm using a garden analogy, but, tending the field, and then, with each successive generation comes along and plants what's needed for future generations, but there's those moments when we're exchanging and we're learning from each other. So I just want to thank you so much for your, sharing your words, and we want to take this opportunity now to actually have us as groups working on these same questions about what is the knowledge that we need to bring in or, transfer to future generations. And then what are some of the mechanisms that we can put into place to assist or to help that happen? So thank you very much to all of you and taking the time to come and share your knowledge with us. Thank you.
Thank you.